people here as they come in. I'll let them in, obviously. Also, I remind everybody, keep your Zooms on mute if you can, unless you're speaking. That way there isn't a weird echo and things don't get strange. I'm absolutely, you see me here letting everybody in as I speak. It's distracting, sorry. I'm delighted to see so many old friends here. Of course, the task at hand is to pay tribute to Rabbi Israel Wohlgelernter, Harav Yisrael Elazar ben Harav Yaakov Yitzchak, now a little bit more than a month since his passing. And we do so that we may continue to honor him, that we may be able to articulate our gratitude to him and for him. And so that may we continue to work on processing his loss in productive ways. Last Sunday, there was a similar event that was held by several friends and family. I see that several of you are here today as well. Today's format will be slightly different. I selected a few people who, in my mind, were exceptionally close with him and who experienced him in various capacities, who hopefully would present sides of Rabbi Wohlgelernter that are both familiar and unfamiliar. We have today his eldest daughter, Elisheva Gordon, who teaches Torah in Israel. We have attorney and law professor and my old shul buddy, Joel Cohen. We have Richard McBee, who served as president of the Young Israel and benefited from Rabbi Wohlgelernter as his primary teacher of Torah. I will then conclude with some of my own personal reflections, and then, time permitting, we'll invite several of you who want to say a few words. We'll try to limit it to a couple of minutes and get a vast array of involvement. Okay, so that's the plan. That's the plan for now. And so, Elisheva, you're there. I invite you to please speak to us.
Hi, thank you, everybody. It's really an honor to be here. And a week ago, actually, I wasn't able to speak. I just didn't have the words, and I'll try to find the words now. It's interesting how this last month at the funeral I was able to speak, and I don't know if many of you have seen it. I'll share it with you. My father gave me this. I felt this assertiveness. My father had asked me to speak, and I was just able to honor him, and it was a big schus. And then since then, I was a total mess. I have to say this last month has not been easy. And a week ago, when there was the memorial service on Sunday, seeing the people from Yifa and all these friends gave me a lot of comfort and a lot of strength. So Gavriel asked me to, Rabbi Bellino asked me to speak, so I will say just a few words. I'm gonna actually, can I share my screen? Because my father would want me to show a text. So,
yes.
So open up your Chumash to page, follow the screen, and I just would like to speak a little bit about the parsha that was yesterday. Can I share? Is there screen sharing?
Yes, of course.
Center.
No, you disabled it. Okay. If
But maybe not.
Okay, so if I don't have a screen, I can't share screen. You disabled it.
I disabled it.
Okay, and you can't get it back? Okay.
No.
All right, so I'll just quote from a medrash over here. So there's a medrash in Truma, and I said this at my bat mitzvah in Israel on the second floor. We had an Oneg Shabbos, and this was about 39 years ago. And I said, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Marchati Lachem Torati, Kivyochol Nimkera Ima, Shene'amar Vayikhu li Truma. Mashal Melech Shaya lo bat yechida. A king had an only daughter, and one of the princes from far away came and married her and took her away. And the king was very lonely. And he said, my daughter, I gave you, said to the prince, I said, I gave you my daughter. I miss her so much. I can't part with her. But on the other hand, I can't say to you, don't take her. So do me a favor, do me a favor. בכל מקום שאתה הולך, קיתון אחד עשה לי שהדור אצלכם, שאיני יכול להניח את ביתי. Any place I go, I would like for you to make me a little room, and I can be with my daughter. כך אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא לישראל, נתתי לכם את התורה, לפרוש ממנה איני יכול. I gave you the Torah, and I can't separate from her, and I don't know what to do. So any place that you go, Am Yisrael, make for me a little place, and I will be able to dwell with my Torah, and that's Vasuli Mikdash. So I think my Beit Mikdash, and it's always been my Beit Mikdash, has been Young Israel, Fifth Avenue. That's where I grew up. And I have to say that my perspective of viewing my father might be a little bit different, but I really felt last week connected. I was a member of the shul. I heard this drushas that you were talking about, and my father's davening, and how he been. I felt proud. I feel proud to be a true member of the shul, not removed, but part of. This was my family. So the Medrash is talking about that God wants to have our Shekhinah, and we should live among. God wants to live among us, and so in a shul, inside our Beit Mikdash, inside the village. And one of the things about the Mishkan, the Mishkan is the space is very clear in the Torah about northwest, east, and south. And last week it came up very clearly, like people came from the east, from Stuyvesant Town, from the west, from Chelsea, from the north, I don't know what that neighborhood is called, and from the south, from Greenwich Village. And we all met in the center. And this was really the center of the desert known as Manhattan, of Jews wandering and looking for some Torah. And I think the comparison, the analogy is so real. And my father led this shul for 45 years, a little bit more than Moses did in the desert of 40 years. And it continues on. The question about the second medrash that I would like to just mention, the second medrash, it says, Vayasuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. Okay, now the problem in the pasuk would say, v'shachanti betocho, make me a tabernacle and I will dwell in it. But the pasuk doesn't say in it. It says among them. So who's the them? And the medrash says in every person's heart, every person's heart. So one of the things that's very clear to me is that the Mishkan is only made of gold and silver and wood and fabric. But what the Mishkan is really made of is the people who built the Mishkan. And that's what Hashem is saying. I will dwell among them, among all the people who gave their contribution. And all of you have contributed enormously to the shul. And that's why God is saying, I will dwell among you, in each of your hearts of you, in each of every one of you. Now, one of the things, the Mishkan serves the people and not the other way around. Hashem Shekhinah lives among the people in everyone's heart. And that's what keeps the Torah and the Spirit alive. And two things I just want to mention personally about my dad. One of the different furniture in the Mishkan, right? We had the shulchan for the bread and the aron for the luchos, and one of the ketoras was the smell. And I just want to say one thing about smell. Smell of all our senses, especially now in COVID, is one of the strongest experiences that we have. We don't even realize how powerful smell is until we lose it. And smell, like the hadassim on Sukkot, is comparable to maasim tovim. It's that we can't touch it, we can't feel it, we can't measure it, but we know it's there, and we know that presence is there. And that smell, that's the ketores. That's the smell of the Mishkan. That's the smell. That's the memory. And that's anybody who studied like brain science, the smell part of our memory, what we smell of our childhood, that doesn't go away. We could remember that, the closet in our grandmother's closet, we could smell a shul, we could smell a sefer, we could smell what that memory is. And it's beautiful to see how everybody's memories are so strong. You know, we all look a lot older, but our smell is strong. Our memories of Maasim Tovim is very strong. And I think my father, just the little things, I don't know if you know this about him, but every time we went for a walk, he would like pick a flower or pick a bush and smell it. And he would say, Borei minei b'samim. And that was one of a bracha that he really liked. And he would smell it and it would bring him joy. And he said, I'm going to go to Gan Eden one day and they're going to ask me if I enjoyed this world. And I will be able to say, yes, I did. I enjoyed every flower, every smell, every good food, every taste, everything of this world. And all the aromas and all the flavors. And that was the Bisamim, and that's the Maasim Tovim. That's one thing I would like to share. And the second thing I'd like to share is that idea of identity. Okay? We identify with the shul. And often my father said, the shul is me, I am my shul. And I would say, and who am I? He said, you are my daughter. Like as if there was no, and that's it. Who are you? You are my daughter, as if that were enough. So I think that I personally was very comforted last week hearing everybody speak, because I felt that I wasn't alone. Like you are my family in so many ways. Even if I'm not in touch with you, but we all share connected to my dad. And my father had many names, right? Not many names, a few names. One name, most of you know him as Rabbi. And we, as children, we know him as Daddy. But he became, in the last 20 years, he became known as Zeta. He was a grandfather. And he had the beard long before he was a Zeta. And that idea of Zeta, he was everybody's Zeta. Not only just a rabbi, but that love and that closeness. And that's just how I feel. This is not so organized, I'm sorry, but this is just coming from my heart. There are ties of family, there are blood ties, and there are shul ties. And the ties of the shul, I think, are the most strongest. They're quite strong. And I thank you for that. And I wait to hear more memories of my dad. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Joel. Joel Cohen.
Well, thank you, Reb Gav.
Counselor.
That's a tough act to follow. I was originally going to apologize to you and any of your siblings who were there, because whatever I have to say would be Torah light. But you said something there that I'm going to pick up on in a minute. I see Carol on the screen. I don't see all the faces there, but I probably know your father longer than, with the exception of maybe Carol, anybody that I see on the screen. I first came to the Young Israel and I was in law school in 1965. I was living in Brooklyn and it was Sukkot and I had to be in New York, and I stayed at the Broadway Central Hotel, if you can remember what a dive that was. And I came there on Erev Sukkot, and we went up, the rabbi took me up to that little sukkah on the first floor. And he asked about me, as he always asked people when he would meet them for the first time. And he said, perhaps you could say a Devar Torah for us tomorrow night. And I said, Rabbi, I don't think you want to go down that road. But I saw in the rabbi, picking up on what Elisheva says over the years, that enjoyment of life. You know how his eyes always lit up when you showed him or talked to him about something new that he hadn't known before. And I remember one time, this was long before he was married. He didn't have a beard. He certainly didn't have a white beard. He had red hair. And he was talking about the difficulty of adhering to religious principles and practices when you live in a totally secular society. And it was around Christmas time. And his drasha was about that subject. And he said that earlier in the week, it was just before Christmas, and he had walked up the subway stairs near his home. And some kids were standing there, and they saw him. Now they're thinking about it's later when his beard was white. And they said, well, there's Santa Claus. And he sort of smiled. He enjoyed the moment. And Stanley Crossmull, you remember him, was sitting next to me in the back corner of the shul. We used to refer to as the John Wilkes Booth corner of the shul. And Stanley says, well, maybe the rabbi should stop wearing that red suit all the time and people won't confuse him so much. Years later, the rabbi, we were leaving the community and the rabbi had an extra ticket to a concert at Carnegie Hall. And he asked me if I'd like to go with him. Now, classical music is sort of wasted on me, but of course the rabbi's inviting me and I went with him. And I went up, as you know, I traveled by motor scooter. So we decided, the rabbi and I, that we would go down to, 18th Street. There was that restaurant that fellow George Goldring owned. And we would go there and have a bite afterwards. And I said, Rabbi, how about taking a ride with me on the back of my bike? And his eyes lit up. And he gets on the back. He's got the long white beard and takes off the hat. He's got a long black coat. We get on the bike and we're riding down 7th Avenue. And people are starting to laugh because this is sort of a spectacle. Obviously, a rabbi with a long white beard riding on the back of a motorcycle. And he said, why are they laughing? I said, Rabbi, they're not laughing at me. And he enjoyed the moment. We came there and there's a picture of him. I think it's Gav, you have that picture with him with a motorcycle helmet on. Another time I was talking to him about a basketball game and he said, that'd be interesting, a basketball game. And I had tickets to the Knicks and they were playing the Chicago Bulls. And if you remember at the time, the greatest basketball player in history was playing for the Chicago Bulls that time. So I picked the rabbi up in front of his apartment and he said, no bike tonight? I said, okay, it's a little cold tonight. So we took a cab up there. We get there and he was kind of surprised by the loud music. And I said, look at that guy, number 23 in the red uniform. That's Michael Jordan. He's the greatest basketball player that ever lived. He wasn't too impressed by it. They're all tall. So what's the big deal? So later on, he lost track of who Jordan was. And I said to him, well, Rabbi, it's the black guy. And he said, oh. And you understand why that shouldn't have meant too much at the time, but okay. At some point, I was asked by him to roast him at one of these shul dinners. And I had managed to somehow get some guy to create this montage of photographs of important events. And one of them was, I think, Elisheva, I think I gave the thing to your brother. One of them was like Queen Elizabeth being inaugurated, or what else? Oh, Jack Ruby shooting Leo Harvey Oswald. And another one was a picture of the Beatles playing. And after it was over, he sort of enjoyed it. And he looked, he says, who were those 4 guys in the band with the guitars? And I said, well, that was Frank Sinatra as a young man. And he laughed. He thought that was Frank Sinatra as a young man. We talked to something a little more serious. So one day, as most of you know, I'm a criminal lawyer. And I had a client who became a friend, and the client was down on his luck in many ways. He had been thrown out by his family. He had his business closed up. And he was about to go to jail, frankly. And sometimes clients feel that their criminal lawyer is their only friend in the world. The things that they've done, they can't really talk to anyone else about. And this guy, he would go to shul, but he was no longer near his community for obvious reasons. And he decided to come to the Young Israel. And he would come sort of late before the rabbi spoke. And he sat down next to me because I was the person he could turn to. And the rabbi got up on that fire warden perch of his to give a drasha, and the back door was closed. And he started talking at the top of his lungs, as you all remember. On a quiet day, you could have heard his voice at Washington Square. And he was going on. He was really railing. He had everything in this about ethics, about adherence to Jewish law, about treating people well, about tzedakah. Every possible thing that you could do wrong, the rabbi was all over it. And everybody sort of, as he was finishing up, sort of looked sad because, he was pointing out the deficiency in all of us. So it was time to say Musaf, and I looked at my friend and said, what do you think? And he had a sullen look on his face. And I tried to talk to him during Musaf, wasn't interested. So I said, well, let's go up to Kiddush. And we went up to Kiddush, and now he's affirmatively angry at me. I said, well, what did I do? He said, why would you tell the rabbi all of that about me? I started to laugh. He said, now you're laughing at me? I said, I'm laughing at you because every single person in the congregation, every single person on this screen thought the rabbi was talking about them, to them. And that was the beauty of it. Every single time you heard him speak, you came away better because he pointed his finger right in your chest. Ata ha'ish. And anyone who ever walked into 3 West 16th Street knew that and felt that and learned from that. And it'll lead to the neshama. Thank you, Reb Gav.
Next, we have Richard McBee.
Gavri, thank you so much for putting this together. And it is, I have to admit, though, a pleasure to see all of you on this screen. Great memories, to say the least, and continuing friendships. So, I was looking through my files, see if I had written something years ago about Rabbi Wohlgelernter. I felt like I kind of spoke a lot last weekend. Then I had a couple of memories, just out of the blue, things I did with him. There was a time when there was a green sukkah on the roof, and it was old, dilapidated, and I don't even remember exactly why, but then we had to renovate it. It may have been actually it was probably when we renovated the building. And so we rebuilt the sukkah. You know that Rabbi Wohlgelernter was the supervisor of construction. I mean, obviously, halakhically, but he guided everything. He had his hands on that. He was a hands-on man. And it always touched me. Hands-on, yeah. I don't know, do you remember we had one of our Purim spiels in which he played King Ahasuerus? We had a British lord's wig that he wore in robes, playing King Ahasuerus. He was astounding. I mean, and we had written a script, and he was reading dutifully from the script. I mean, this is a man who could, as it were, throw off his gravitas as a rabbi, which he always was, and just be fun. Talking about appreciating things of this world. Elisheva, you reminded me. I believe it was the last trip he took with your mother. They went to Italy. Is that right? He asked, because he knew I loved Italy and been many times. He asked me, and I gave him my guidebook for Italy. And they went all over, digging in, probably in, I'm assuming, many churches, certainly many museums, but loving art, loving life. So let me just read this. This was written 10 years ago. 23 years ago in Parshas Bo, I started on a long road in your shul. This is addressed to Rabbi Wohlgelernter, the Young Israel, Fifth Avenue. On that Shabbos, I sat in the back, overwhelmed by the prospect of learning and observance. I had no idea that in that very shul, there was someone who would guide me to become an observant Jew. I had no interest in becoming an observant Jew when I walked in there, you understand. You were that man, Rabbi Wohlgelernter. I came back week after week and then day after day, and you were always there, teaching and praying and leading by your quiet example in the fundamental way I owe my Yiddishkeit to you. That's the absolute truth. We spend precious time in Sheloshim with the Gemara, the Siddur on Rosh Chodesh Sundays, not to mention Wednesday evenings with Chumash with Rashi. In response to my endless questions, which you kept on trying to get me to be a nice guy and have patience and concentrate on the subject at hand, after all those years, I may be getting the knack of it, but thanks to your persistence. While I certainly cherish the learning, simply being in shul with you day after day, year after year, has made the most indelible mark on me. The way you conduct yourself in shul, the care, the concentration of your davening, and the importance you ascribe to the minyan and the congregation has shaped me in countless ways. Your piety rubbed off and taught me that observance is founded on respect, understanding, and belief. I continue to be deeply touched and honored that you came to every exhibition I ever had, looked at all my artwork, and took my creativity seriously. The last one he came to, I'm interjecting, was in September of 2015 in Yerushalayim, in the Jerusalem Biennial. I had visited him, I believe, in the morning, told him about the exhibition, delivered something, was something I was supposed to deliver from New York. He came all the way across town by himself. Elisheva, did you meet him later that day? Yeah.
No, we went together.
You went together. Well, he obviously wanted to go. And we discussed at least two of the big paintings I had there. I was just so honored and touched. And in fact, this I totally forgot, I'll never forget, I didn't know I did. One evening, we did a joint presentation of a series of my paintings and the care and sensitivity of your comments and observations. When you encouraged me to accept a leadership position in your shul, your confidence and faith gave me the courage to take the leap and become a shul president. Your influence opened up a whole new dimension of my life and has matured me immeasurably. Rabbi Wohlgelernter, I humbly thank you for being my rabbi. And was true then and still true now. May his memory be a blessing for all of us.
Rabbi Wohlgelernter became my rabbi when I was 3. That was 41 years ago. The rabbi was present for arguably my most formative years. Not many people can say that they were presented with a nursery school diploma and a ketubah by the same person. He was at my bar mitzvah in Israel, my bar mitzvah here as well, and he was also at my son's bris. Like so many of you, his passing inspired a rush of thoughts, feelings, and memories. For all of my life, Rabbi Wohlgelernter modeled his version of the religious personality, a very unique brand of religious authenticity and scholarship. Often this presented in the form of lofty transcendence and impenetrable fire. You see, his rabbinate was one that is no longer in vogue. He was, in fact, the screaming rabbi who talked down to us from above. Literally, he would speak from a diving board ladder. He was highly conservative, and he presented his old world authenticity. He was absolutely fearless as to how his remarks or how his suggestions would be perceived. He begged my parents not to send me to Ramaz. He begged them to not let me go to a conservative summer camp. He was then pleasantly relieved when I studied at Yeshivat Shalavim, but then annoyed again when I went off to Brandeis University. Brandeis University is about as secular as Shalosh Shudas, but it still wasn't good enough. It wasn't yeshiva. He was again relieved when I went to YU, but annoyed that I was spending too much time with the rebel types. He had a complete disgust for anything that smacked of lacking Jewish authenticity. And that included, but was certainly not limited to, Messianic Lubavitch, conservative Judaism, academic Talmud, neo-Hasidism, carrying in Manhattan on Shabbat, and even hummus. I'm super curious if his prolonged time in Israel softened the hummus dislike. I remember him calling it machal behemoths. He didn't like my progressive origins, associations, and leanings, and he routinely told me so. He told me that I was pushing the envelope. And this all led to occasional discomfort, but it was part of what I signed up for. It was the dance of our relationship. He was on one side of the counter, and I was on the other, but neither of us really wanted to go anywhere. But this wasn't it, because just as often, if not more so, his brand was one of irreplicable sensitivity and kindness. He had an appreciation for the arts, especially music. He was the sweet father and grandfather who wanted the best for us, loving us despite and perhaps even for our failings and absurdities. He was an adoring teacher who would annually celebrate Hanukkah with his students. The New Yorker who felt rooted in Jerusalem, but the Yerushalmi who knew that nothing rivaled New York. There's only one of each, he would often say. And so it was a mix of this that made him tolerate us. He didn't mind that it took us 17 years to finish Maseches Brachos. He was oddly flexible. He would agree to go to a hockey game or jump on the back of Joel Cohen's Vespa. And he was good to us. He would lovingly pore over the yard site lists and boards. He felt a very unique responsibility for those who passed on. He was very good to me. He not only taught me, but he gave me attention. I'm pretty sure that my very first piece of correspondence came from him. I'll read it to you. It's dated the 4th of Adar, 5744, February 7th, 1984. Dear Gavriel, I was very happy to hear that you helped your mommy empty tzedakah pushkas in your home. That was a big double mitzvah, and I'm proud of you. I'm also sure that many of the coins that you counted were put there by yourself. On behalf of the many needy families that our tzedakah fund helps, I thank you. One mitzvah leads to another, and may you learn more Torah and so many mitzvot. You are a lucky fellow to have such wonderful parents, and may God bless you all. Sincerely yours, Israel Wohlgelernter. I kept it. I spent many Saturday nights with him. And after what felt like an hour's worth of Vayitain Lacha, the rabbi would make Havdalah. Then immediately he would fold his talis from Shabbos, because you're not allowed to fold your talis on Shabbos. That was the thing. And then he would make his way over to the yahrzeit boards to screw in the appropriate light bulbs corresponding to who died that particular in the upcoming week. He knew where everyone lived. They were his friends. They remained his congregants. Then he would head over to the outside board. With the same Wohlgelernter exactitude, he would daven over the times and the spelling of words, of Hebrew words. And boy, was he angry when he lacked the extra M to reflect the Dagesh in Tammuz, but then was consoled by the existence of an extra W that could temporarily be a suitable M. I knew that Monday morning, Gertie would get a lecture about plastic letters inventory. He would spell out secular months so as not to count them, because the Torah counts its months. The second month is ER, not February. And then he would go and visit an elderly couple that lived across the street from shul. In each pocket of his suit jacket, there would be a glass candle holder that he would take home to wash for the following week's worth of light. And boy, did he teach us. His harshness was often manifest in the way he read a text. Because he didn't read it, he attacked it. Like a boxer moving from side to side, dismantling it and breaking it apart without hesitation. Again and again referencing Missouri, the show me state, meaning your cogitations and your musings are worthless if you cannot prove them in a text. Despite his Ashkenazic, Hasidic Toronto version of Hebrew, there was a consistency and exactitude that was very rare. He was, in fact, a master of lexical stress, never missing a mil-el or a mil-ra. He would articulate sentences with the exactitude of an Hebraicist, which of course he actually was. It's not Mikdash Hashem Konenu Yadecha, it's Mikdash Hashem Konenu Yadecha, and so on. The texts they flowed from him with ease because he was so comfortable with them. They came naturally to him. They were a part of his being. And so I think about his drashot all the time, especially as I prepare my own. I think about the content and the way he delivered that content. There was always an introduction. Sometimes it was a story from his life, an unfortunate conversation with a crazy person in the street, or wisdom from a physician, or something from his childhood. As Joel said, he was aware of the similarity of his appearance to Santa, but he also used his similarity in appearance to Freud to partner with Sforno and darshan Yosef's dreams. Often there would be a Hasidic story. I remember holding back a cry as a 7-year-old when at Kol Nidre he told us about a mother buying brachos from the Berditchever. When he didn't have an introduction, he would always begin, Parshas Truma has 96 psukim, and I'm going to speak about one of them. And then he would continue. I remember he was particularly fond of the homiletical material from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. I remember his using the description of being in the bathhouse with his father as an analogy for the chilling effects of Amalek. One Parshas Chukas, I was in the 2nd grade, and New York State had lotto fever. The rabbi presented whether a Jew is allowed to buy a ticket. His conclusion was you can't buy 2 tickets because that would be the chayser emunah of Moses. That would be the lacking of faith that Moshe experienced, who hit the rock twice. But you can buy 1 because, he concluded, you have to be in it to win it. I swear for an embarrassing long period of time, I thought that Rabbi Wohlgelernter had penned that perfect slogan. When I was in 1st grade, he used the centennial birthday of the Brooklyn Bridge as a metaphor for Jewish unity. I think a lot about his 33-year-long Kuzari class, his tefillah classes at the Rosh Chodesh breakfasts. And so that's who he was. He was at times harsh, and he was very loving. He was unapproachable at times, but he also made it clear that he was one of us. He was very careful and very exact, but also very emotional, incredibly so. And so perhaps this combination was most evident when he davened. He would scream and yell and quake and pound, but also he would sing and cry and shake and stammer and then dance. It was a whole lot. It was absolutely exhausting. But I knew that it probably protected us for another year. And I know now it definitely made us who we are. Now that I think about it, he was particularly fond of the Talmudic equation of parents and teachers. And he really considered many of us to be his spiritual heirs, his theogenetic children. He let us know that routinely as well. It's probably what allowed him to chastise us when we were being stupid, but also love us despite our nonsense. It's what made our relationship so complex at times, because I know that he made me who I am. And I know that my experimentation with identity and my journey of maturity also made me contradict the molds that he set out for me. And yet I find myself returning to it. And so for this and more, I'm grateful to him for his role in my life and to his family who facilitated it. His devotion to our community was in several ways a unique sacrifice. We saw his Israel life, and we could not believe how much time he separated himself from it for our benefit, for us. In my professional and spiritual life, I always knew that I couldn't fill his shoes. And so when you can't fill a shoe, you look for a smaller one. And yet at the same time, I never stopped hearing his voice every time I read a verse, every time I turned the page of a sermon, every time I daven Geshem or Tal or Ne'ilah, or when I speak from the pulpit, or when I say correct, or when I sing that absolutely horrible version of Mizmor LeDavid. You know the one. I'm not a sentimental person at all. It's probably part of my mental illness. But I kept one memento from 16th Street, and they're the candle holders that held the glass holders, the glass vessels that he would wash every week. I kept them because they remind me of 16th Street. They remind me of his fire. They remind me of his light. And they remind me of his warmth. They remind me of his davening. And they remind me of the way that he took care of a community week after week, day after day. And so I join you in praying that his neshama should continue to shine and rise ever closer to its divine source. May he continue to look after us, and may his family and spiritual family continue to experience consolation. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share this. And now I invite anyone else who'd like to speak for a bit to unmute yourself one at a time, please.
I'd like
Sheila.
to speak.
Yeah.
Who?
Sheila and Bob Feinerman.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Not anymore.
You're muted.
Paul will tell.
Okay. Am I muted now?
No, we can hear you.
Okay.
You are good now.
All right. I'm not really prepared with any sort of uniform speech, but I'll just, some thoughts that came to mind as I was listening. First of all, when I heard Joel Cohen say that he knew Rabbi Wohlgelernter probably longer than anyone, that's nowhere close to the time that we knew him. Because, well, his brother Moshe Wohlgelernter, is married to my cousin Esther Wohlgelernter. So Yisrael was sort of a Ben Bias, sort of a member of the family. And my father was Bill Feinerman, and we lived on 4th Street and 2nd Avenue. And starting in 1955, we started walking up to 16th Street and 5th Avenue. And then later when they moved to 6th Street between 1st Avenue and Avenue A, which was, again, a half a block from where you are now. My father would never go to what was a community synagogue center because they had no mechitza. We occasionally would go there on a Saturday night because they davened downstairs in the base medrash. But otherwise, we would never go. So all those years, my father would walk up to 16th Street. And of course, I would walk with him and my brother and even my sister, maybe, I'm not sure. But anyhow, but Yisrael was sort of, as I said, was sort of a member of the family. When we started going there about 1955, and I think that Yisrael, I don't know when Yisrael started, but when he started, he certainly was not married, and he used to eat by us on Friday nights. So I would walk on Friday nights to 16th Street and would walk back to him, and obviously would be speaking to him, not so much as a congregant, but as a relative. And I remember that his famous words to me were VVZDT. I don't know if anyone else knows what that was, but he was despairing of anything good happening family-wise to him. And VVZDT stands for Was wenn sein den Tachlis. He was despairing anything, but obviously, he got married to Debbie, who was a classmate of mine. I went to graduate school of mathematics, and so was she. I mean, I never met any of his children. The last time I saw Yisrael was at his brother's funeral, which is about 5 years ago. And he told me that at that point he was living in Lakewood, or he was in Lakewood a long time. And the thing that impressed him most was that his davening was so much better. He was able to daven so much better because he was in Lakewood. But anyway, but that goes back to the days when, going back to the days when Young Israel 15 was sort of being founded. I mean, my father and I would walk there on a Saturday morning. Occasionally there wouldn't be a minyan, and to get a minyan, they'd go next door to 5 West 16th Street where the artist Saul Raskin was, and they'd pull him out to bring it. Then but then gradually, obviously, the shul grew. But some of the members I don't know if sure they were members. Some of the people who used to daven there were Theodore Bakel, Joseph Papp. They all davened there. Theodore Bakel in particular, I remember, because he was a Cohen. His father, he came with his parents, who were real old-fashioned Jews from Europe, and he would duchen on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. And I remember, he had a trained voice, and he would, when they'd be singing, it would be going on and on and on. Unfortunately, though, he was close to Yisrael Wohlgelernter, but he stopped coming to the shul when Yisrael Wohlgelernter refused to marry him because he was a gerusha, he was a divorcee. But anyhow, but those were the days. I don't know. They were a long time ago. I was a Balkore there, by the way, from 1955 till 1966, because my father was the Rabbi and he volunteered me. So I was the Balkore there. But those were, very, very good days that I remember fondly. I said, I wish I was.
Thank you so much.
I wish I was prepared, but these are just, various memories that I have of Israel.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Jeff Katz, I know that you wanted to say a few words. So please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to see all of you. Some of you I know very well. Some of you I don't. I'm so glad we're all here together to memorialize Rabbi Wohlgelernter. And thank you, Rabbi Bellino, for organizing this. I was very moved by the outpouring of emotion and memories last Sunday evening when I listened to the recording of the Sheloshim hosted in New Jerusalem. Repeatedly, people spoke of him as their Rav, their teacher, and their friend. He left an indelible mark on their lives and their families, as he has ours. He built an Orthodox center in mid-Manhattan, and that attracted so many from all directions. And I was fortunate to be part of that for 15 plus years. In his zechut, I have one story which characterizes my early relationship with him and which has enormously benefited me ever since. In the mid-90s, I was regularly attending the morning minyan at Yifa, and suddenly my father died. I was saying Kaddish, and I felt I was ready to take the Amud. After a few mornings, Rabbi W. asked me to stay after services and asked me to sit down next to him and recite the Shmona Esrei word by word. I felt as if I had been sent to the principal's office to be disciplined. You understand, this was a chilling, intimidating moment when I surrendered all vulnerability to his mentorship. Wherever necessary, he methodically corrected my pronunciation and the emphasis I placed on words, and insisted that I translate each word, every word. He was patient and methodical, and we all know what a perfectionist he was. Looking back on these episodes, I would say that he worked with me as would a father, giving me the chinuch my own father couldn't. I have been the beneficiary of those sittings all these many years, and today I'm a regular Baal Tefillah in my shul. The influence and learning one person has on another is so hard to measure. I can honestly say that less than a handful of teachers I've ever had has had an enduring influence on me in the same way as did Rabbi Wohlgelernter. Whenever and wherever I daven, I seem to sense his presence. I hear his intonation, I hear his particular accent and his passion. I thank him very much for this gift and for so many of his Maisim Tovim that I experienced. May his memory be for a blessing. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Thank you so much. Miriam, I think I heard your voice.
Yes, I do.
Good.
I don't remember the years now, but there was a point I had been going to the Wednesday night Rashi class, and some of us asked Rabbi Wohlgelernter to give a Tehillim class. The first time we met, there must have been like 25 people, but most of those people weren't prepared for the way Rabbi Wohlgelernter was going to teach Tehillim. So within 2 weeks or so, it came down to like maybe 10 people or 8 people, something like that. Rabbi Wohlgelernter had a difficulty explaining things to us because he had the Art Scroll book in front of him with the Art Scroll non-versified translation, non-versified Hebrew, and as I soon realized, tone-deaf translation. So after a few weeks, I proposed to Rabbi Wohlgelernter. I said, I have the entire Tanakh on CD. I can make it, I can prepare printouts with the Tehillim versified. He didn't know what I meant. But I came in the first week with the first psalm, and I made the stanzas differently from what he expected. And I think I used the Art Scroll translation, but I shortly realized that the Art Scroll translations were really tone deaf. Now you have to know my Hebrew was not very good at that time, but then I proceeded to try and translate the Psalms myself. And boy, was that a learning experience. And I am forever indebted to Rabbi Wohlgelernter for providing that opportunity. He wasn't happy with my translation, so I had to I was giving him 4 or 5 also different translations, JPS 1, JPS 2, Art Scroll, everything. I was doing all of those things. But that was an opportunity. And sometimes he would look at me, he said, where did you get that from? Where did you get that from? And it was intimidating, but the opportunity was, but he never said stop doing it. And so I must have done maybe 20 or 30 Psalms while that class continued. And I continued to translate Psalms, and it's one of the great pleasures that I have. So I am very much indebted for that opportunity that he provided, and for the as Jeff has said, for the standard that he held up. And Jeff, I have to say that I really enjoy you being a Baal Tefillah. You really. It's so easy to follow the words. When I came a few years ago to say Shacharis for my brother, and I heard you every morning, and it was a great convenience, because when you're not familiar with the service, it's really important that the Baal Tefillah read it with understanding. So, and I'm thinking now, I remember enjoying Rabbi Wohlgelernter's Ne'ilah service and all of his special services, because the way he paid attention to the meaning of the words, and
Okay.
it was just beautiful.
You have 100 or 90?
90.
So I owe a great, just to finish, I owe a tremendous debt to Rabbi Wohlgelernter. From the very first moment I walked into the shul, and strong memories.
Gavri,
Yes,
Yeah,
Vivi.
okay.
it's Vivienne. Hi, everybody. I love seeing every individual here. Everyone, thank you.
Except me.
I just want to say, on a lighter note, 3 little things that I just thought of. One was the flip side of Santa. Remember telling the rabbi that when Ryan it was about 30 years ago, we were in Puerto Rico Thanksgiving time, went to the mall, and there was Santa. And Ryan yelled out, "Ma, Dad, there's Rabbi Wohlgelernter." And we told him, and he remembered, of course, he remembered everything. And at Ryan's bar mitzvah is one of the things that he said. We loved him. I loved his costumes for Purim. I loved his makeup, his artwork, how he studied Khomeini, and whatever he did to the fullest. And one more thing about the census, we were having a dinner in honor of Arthur and myself, and Joni and I found these pisamim at a kibbutz, and Rabbi was in Israel. He was coming home, and that was our only way that we can get it there in a timely fashion. And he did not blink an eye. He carried home on the plane. He took with him 200 little pisamim bottles so that we would have a giveaway.
Still use them.
And we're still using them. And I miss Rabbi. I miss the family. I miss everyone. And I'm so happy to see everyone, and I'm happy to share in this. Thank you.
Gavriel?
Yes, Ellen.
Okay. I'll just be very brief, but so many memories are flooding back. To this day, even when we finish the stone chumash, I can hear Rabbi Wohlgelernter saying, "Please hold on to your chumashim for my remarks shortly." Parshas Vayechi, always it's a closed parsha. I can hear his voice. His Shabbos Hagadol and Shabbos Shua drashas were legendary. To this day, when we read Oz Yashir or Aseret Sedibro, I stand for the whole Aliyah because he taught us that we really should be standing for all of Laning, and we shouldn't just be singling out a few psukim. So if we're going to do it, we should stand for the whole Aliyah. When we built that, what you call it, Gavriel, that diving board ladder. So for months afterwards, as he would climb up those steps, if someone hadn't been in shul for a while, they would start laughing, and he would say, "Oh, you haven't been in shul for a while. You didn't know about these steps."
Ali.
Two more quick stories. And this was for the younger people that are on, with social media now, all of you understand how things are recorded. But 30, 40 years ago, I'll never forget it must have been before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, when he was talking about a din v'cheshbon, he talked about when you think you didn't have the money to do this, or you didn't have the time to do this. He said, Hashem's going to roll out your American Express bill and show you what you spent.
Ellen, that was Parshas Vayigash. But go on.
When you show the American Express bill, what you've spent what your money on. I still am haunted by that every rush. I think about that all the time. But it's Vayigash, our parsha. Okay.
It is.
And then finally, when iPods came out, he was so excited that he could learn. He was thinking about all the wasted time he had spent walking from 12th Street to 16th Street. And now that he could listen to drushas on the way to shul, and how much more valuable his time would be spent. And I've always thought about that, even as I do daf yomi while my nails were drying for the manicure. I said, I hope this is okay, Rabbi Wohlgelernter. That it's not Biltzul's mom that way. All right, just a few memories.
Thank you so much.
Gavriel?
Yes.
Yes. Can I speak?
Yes, Kathy.
This is lovely. Elisheva, what you started off with was, everybody's saying is beautiful. And I picked up something. I want to express gratitude to Hashem for the great privilege that I had to be able to work for the rabbi for his last few years in New York. He had called me from Israel, and he said, "Could you do me a favor? I have a lot of mail at my apartment. Can you go to my apartment? I'll make arrangements for you to be able to do this. Can you go to my apartment, get the mail, and organize it? Put the financial stuff together, put the social stuff together, put all the different categories together." I did. I went to his apartment. He had tons of mail, and I put all these categories together. When he came back, he was happy with what I did, and he asked me if I would continue to work for him. So I did, and I started to work for him. Sometimes it was just once a week, then it got to be twice a week, then it got to be 3 times a week. From organizing, putting papers together, away, throwing away, going shopping for him, going shopping with him. One of the things that both Elisheva said and Joel said was about the rabbi's enjoyment of things. And I would come in sometimes and I'd say, "How are you doing, Rabbi?" And he'd say, he had a pain, an ache. I'd say, "How was the concert you went to last night?" He lit up. His eyes, his blue eyes just lit up. And he started to kvel about this concert and the beautiful music. And he just was so interested in everything. I remember we watched a lot of Kennedy Center honors on my iPhone, and we was able to see the different people who were honored on Kennedy Center on my iPhone. he was very emotional, very formal, very everything. You know, he was just a very, very formal, sweet, loving, caring, strict man. Sometimes I would talk too much and he would get annoyed at me. I'd see his face was like annoyed, and I'd say, Rabbi, what about if I just raise my hand and when I want to speak, and you can call on me when you want me to speak. And so he said, okay. So that's how we operated. I would raise my hand, I'd go by him, I'd raise my hand, I'd go about my business, and then he'd call upon me when he was ready to hear me speak.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So thank you all so much.
Okay, thank you.
Rabbi,
Yes, Carol, I hear you.
you hear me?
Carol,
I
so
can't believe it.
Carol, we're having
It's
some
like-
trouble with your internet, and it doesn't even sound like you.
know.
So just blow us a kiss.
I'm gonna blow you a kiss.
Great.
Gavriel?
So much love. Yes.
Yes.
Richard Bell.
Yeah, I think we have to acknowledge that we all know how difficult it can be and what a sacrifice very often for a public figure that his family has to sacrifice very often. And I was the recipient of that in a way, and it was Jeff's memory that reminded me, and I'm always very grateful for the way I was considered. And that is that I was a chiyuv the same time that the rabbi was. This would have been when the Rebbetzin passed away, and he would be a chiyuv for a month, and then his sons for the year. I was a chiyuv for a year. And every time I went to allow them to have the Amud, and you were there at the time, Gavriel, as a young person, so you know that seems to me that it was every day that I was davening, and in some ways I was embarrassed by that because I knew that they had certainly equal obligation, and it was their home shul too. But he said, "This is your shul," and even though it clearly was theirs, he understood that as a congregant, I had in his mind a certain right and a certain a need to have the shul be there for me that otherwise maybe I couldn't have gotten anywhere else. And so I thank him for that. I thank the family for that too, because it was a great gift of a year that was so special to me.
Beautiful, beautiful. So thank you so much, everybody, for participating today. I would ask that if you have any photos, mementos, that sort of thing, to scan them in. I would really love to have my hands on it and obviously share it with the family. That's number one. Number two, I would very much like to be able to continue to articulate his name and his ideas, especially in this neighborhood that he was so important within, and that he was that his work was such a part of who we are, who we became. And we're all, some of us are now in other places, and some of us are in a different shul just 10 blocks south. But I'd like to be able to incorporate him into some kind of recurring memorial, and just to be able to articulate his name consistently. It's important to me. Finally, I hear Mitch Herstick.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Mitch, you're going to close this off, okay?
Okay, fine. When I think of Rabbi Wohlgelernter, the first word that comes to mind is dignity. Everything that he did about his life was dignified, a dignified manner. In the 22 years I was there, so many people learned from him. And when someone asked me, oh, you live in the village. Oh, do you go to that shul where the rabbi climbs the ladder? Oh, we were there. We had a nice time for a Shabbos, so I had to say Kaddish there. Everyone had a very nice story about the shul Rabbi Wohlgelernter. And I thought in his memory, and of course on Shabbos, his drushes, with his whole heart, he gave a drush, and very personal. I thought I would just say one part of one drasha that I remember. We've just read, it was on the occasion of his mother's yortzeit. And we just read that after Kriyas Yamsuf, Miriam had drums, and it's in the Torah, of course, and she made a shira. So the rabbi said she thought ahead with the drums. The rabbi was a young boy in Toronto, a few years old, and he was playing, and he found some soap. And he said to his mother, he said, "Ma, what's with it? Why do you have soap?" She said, "That's soap I brought from Poland for your wedding." And he said his mother, like Miriam, thought ahead. And those were the kind of drushes that really got you in the kishkas that Rabbi Wohlgelernter gave. You know, and I could hear what he would say yesterday, Pasha Zachar, we would have a whole, he would tell us, I'm sure, listen, Yossi's going to read. Yossi will walk thousands of miles the lane for us. He doesn't need any help. Don't chime in. Don't help him. Let him. Don't. You know, that was always Parsha Zachar. He had his sayings. He had a lot of sayings. Elisheva said in 45 years, I'm sure that he would say, a lot of water flowed down the Hudson in the 45 years that he was there. I did forget something before I started speaking. I should have asked you if you could hear me in the back, because of course all the women always used to say no, louder. So he was a wonderful person, a wonderful Rav. The shul was a perfect fit for him. A bigger shul wouldn't have worked. This was a perfect shul for him. So, and finally, maybe I'll speak on behalf of other people.
Mitch, we're losing you.
I'll speak of myself, that I always heard it, yes, many of us also did, and I feel badly about that. So may his neshama have an aliyah, and I will always remember him, and I'm sure we all will remember him.
Amen. All right, beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I will have a recording of it that I can make available. I'll post it on the 6th Street page, and you can find it on Facebook. If you want it, if you don't hear from me, if you need it, or if you have any materials for me. So you can email me, rabbi@6thstreetsynagogue.org, and we'll be in touch, hopefully.
Thank you.
Right, of course.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
Gabriel, thank you so much, and everybody who
Thank you.
spoke. This is very touching.
Beautiful.
All right, much love, everybody.
Thank you, Gavriel. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.